Hi, welcome to Here to There, hosted by Carolyn Taketa, former attorney, current small groups pastor, and life coach. Through monthly conversations with pastors, authors, and guests, we hope to stir your thoughts and encourage you to move from where you are to where you want to be, in your personal life, in your leadership, or in your ministry.
Hi, welcome to Group Talk. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carolyn Taketa, your host and Executive Director of Small Groups at Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village, California. Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was hanging out at a conference with a bunch of small group pastors, several of whom were national speakers in the small group world, and they were from a variety of churches in different areas. And we started to talk about this growing trend back then, about 5 years ago. It was a growing trend toward online small groups. And then things got really heated because some people believe that this is a great flexible option. It makes groups more readily available to everyone. And others were adamant that virtual community is not real community. And it creates shallow connections without the benefit of an authentic life-on-life true relationship. And so after debating it for a while, it was very fascinating and also feisty, because what I realized was that people are passionate about this topic because it reveals what we as small group ministry leaders believe is essential for community, and by extension to small groups ministry. So I know these types of discussions have been happening around online groups for the last few years, and given the rapid increase and accessibility of technology, online church, online groups, this is only growing. So it's time to kind of address it and look at, it's not just for large churches either. Technology has made it so much easier and affordable for smaller churches to get on board with the online platforms and develop online groups. So I think the conversation maybe has shifted from whether we should even have online groups to how do we do that? How do we start them? How do we do it well? How do we incorporate the best elements of community? So we're going to explore these issues today on the program, as well as practical tips on how to get started, both from the tech side and the ministry strategy side. And so on the program with me today is Jay Cranda. Hi, Jay. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Well, Jay, I needed an expert and a young expert for this. Jay is the online campus pastor at Saddleback Church in Lake Forest, California since 2012. And Saddleback has been one of the early adopters of the online campus model, and they've been doing this well for a number of years. So he's a great resource to talk about this. So as I understand it, Jay, the online campus at Saddleback brings in over 20,000 people every week. That means they're streaming to watch the services? Is that what you mean by online campus?
Yeah, so we have found that we used to define it just on our website, and now I think as platforms grow, that's variety of ways now. People are watching on our website, on our apps, on our Roku, on our Amazon Fire, YouTube,
Wow.
Variety of different ways now. So I think with every passing moment, that kind of gets very broader of however they consume the content. So yes, so that's online in a variety of different ways.
And what really impressed me was that 40% of your 1,800 small groups that are part of your online campus are all online and not just in homes. I mean, that is like 1,000 plus online groups that you oversee, which is amazing. Yeah. We've had an explosion in the last couple of years in Saddleback. A big thing early on was there wasn't really it was nobody's primary job to focus on, I would say, like the strategy of online to offline, leveraging this community. And we had multiple people doing multiple things. And a couple of years ago, when we had the opportunity to really focus and really start to really dive into what does it look like to incorporate the online outreach into our overall strategy, we started to test online groups, and there's a lot of people before me that kind of had first iterations of it. And by the time I showed up, I got the benefit of all this hard labor that had been done, and a lot of energy and a lot of forefront stuff that people had figured out. And we started to test online groups. And we just realized that if you just provide easy next step stuff that we do in our churches every week, it doesn't matter how big or small you are. You just say, hey, why don't you get connected? We did the same thing to our online viewers. Hey, why don't you get connected? And we started to have a huge response. And that created problems and opportunities and all sorts of things. But people started to engage. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many groups today. Wow. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack in that. And I want to encourage our audience to just hang with us. Jay hosts a podcast called Social Media Church. He's got an online course around social media for nonprofits. So he's well versed in this. So you're going to have to talk like a normal person, Jay, and kind of break it down for us. So let's think about this. So what are the primary benefits, you think, of having online small groups?
Well, I think one of the primary benefits is to engage people where they're at. It's kind of, we are a big advocate at Saddleback to, go where people are meeting. It's kind of like, it's the idea that Jesus went to the tax collector's home. And a lot of times you wait for them to show up at your church, but a lot of times, people aren't in a place where they're ready for that. We are always trying to think creatively. How do we make it easier for people to take their first step? We talk a lot internally, even on the small groups team, this idea of crawl, walk, run. And the idea is what is a crawl step? And, Jesus did this with come and see, come and die, where he started with the disciples with the simple step, come and see. And then later, wasn't until after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection that eventually they realized they needed to die to themselves, and he had this full commitment. And so with online groups, I think this is just this generation reaching millennial and younger. And even in our context, it's really not a generational thing. I have people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that are part of my online community, and it's just another way to reach people that would never step foot in your campus, that you're able to give them a kind of a first phase kind of experience of what church or community is. And we do not, and I'll say this very clearly to anybody who is listening and engaging, and you can definitely hit me up on Twitter. I would love to engage one-on-one if there's anything you guys are dealing with at your church. But we provide it as kind of a taste of what being part of physical community could be like. And so online groups fit kind of this in-between need of cross step. And then our hope is, and we think very strategically about it, where we say, okay, you've been in an online group for a little bit. What's your next step? Hey, why don't you do what you've done online? Why don't you do it in your home with other people? And that's why our online groups are constantly going down, and our physical groups. And that's why we have 60% of groups that meet at home under my community, and 40% are online, because I'm always looking at trying to get that smaller. And I want them to eventually take another step, depending on where they're at in their faith, to start one physically.
That's a great process. Let me ask you this. So then the online groups aren't just because people are physically, geographically located too far from your campus to go to a home group. You're saying they could be like right in Lake Forest where Saddleback is located, but for whatever reason, their first step towards community is going to be in through that online group instead of a physical one, because it's a lower threshold. I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and there's all varieties, and I think with anybody who's been doing small groups, this when you start talking to your host and talking with your small groups, that there's all sorts of things that are happening in different groups. I have online groups. Primarily, a lot of my local groups are actually people that are hosting a secondary group, and they want to do the study with somebody who has moved away, maybe a sibling, a relative, a child. They do it they're able to connect. And so a lot of times it's like, I wish I can do this study with my cousin, but they're in another state, and they will host a secondary group to reach that individual. Or we have parents and kids who do it when their kids are away from college. Maybe they want to do one of our specialty studies together, and they'll use our platform to engage with each other. And so a lot of times we have some local groups, but the majority of those are more mature believers that are using it as kind of an evangelism tool.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, well, of course, there's the obvious advantages. There's time constraints. You don't have to commute, which is a big deal in some of our areas. You don't have to worry about childcare.
Yeah.
There's, what are the other advantages you think of having it online?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think it's, a lot of times what I have found is when I'm talking to individuals, a lot of times we know the importance. People that are followers of Jesus know the importance that you can't fulfill God's purposes by yourself. You need other people. You need to be challenged and so forth. But to the new believer, a lot of times they're not understanding how important that is, and they're not able to make that a priority. I can't even. I'm thinking about the technology word, proprietary. This is my world. And so they're not thinking about that. And so they might not, reserve a Thursday night or a Tuesday night and get childcare and all that. And so I found that it tends to be a little bit more flexible for them to kind of get in at first, give them a first taste. And so we also have people that are, we have a lot of disability individuals that are able to do this. We have a lot of people that maybe just had new kids, and they're in a season where they, it's chaotic. We have people that work the night shifts, and they're not able to make a normal times. I have one individual, Richard, who's actually part of my leadership team. He lives in the UK, and he is a security guard, and he works every night. And the way it works out is he works night and the Sunday morning shift, and he never could go to church because he's just trying to get bills paid, and he pretty much hosts now a group Saturday mornings, an online group, and he has people from all around the globe, and so it kind of hits the demographic of people that we kind of don't naturally think of, and they're like the fringes, but you're able to still provide an experience for them, and ultimately, you want them to take a next step so that they can, and so maybe some individuals, it's like, I need to rearrange my schedule so that this is a priority, but by experiencing an online group as a first taste, it's like, okay, I can see why this is important.
That's great. That's great reasons. Okay, let's talk about what some of the disadvantages might be to an online group. I mean, the first obvious one would be, presence is an essential component of community. So how can we be present with each other, and have that kind of all the body language, if you're suffering through something, someone's crying, you can't really put your arm around them. How do you kind of have that presence when you're through a screen?
Yeah, I mean, this one is getting easier and easier by every moment that passes when people, recording something like this, and as we connect, video, I think for us, what we do is that we put a high bar to try to make all of our groups video based, because that makes it easier. We don't make it a requirement, because what I have found is some of our groups are very comfortable with text back and forth. Some are very comfortable with, some do group phone calls, some do video calls. And so for us, we make a high priority. Hey, we would love for you to do video all at the same time. And at the same time, I would say on a similar experience, it's just like I said earlier, it's getting more familiar and more familiar for people to be able to have connections from far away. And video does give you the luxury to do that more and more. So for me, I always see, we try to model both in the stories we tell and the people we elevate as volunteers, those who are doing excellent. And our prayer is, and what has happened is that DNA starts rubbing it off on all of our groups. And so, and once you see it done well, and you start hearing the stories, then your guard kind of goes down and like, okay, this is possible. And you got to be careful. You have to have you have to make sure that you are monitoring those groups. You got to make sure the right things are happening and all the proper, again, I am a small groups pastor, and I always tell people I have an online venue to get people connected. So most of my stuff is, I know if I can move somebody online into an online group or a small group in their home, if I can get them around other people, no matter how that is, I know that faith starts becoming more familiar to how New Testament faith is done. And so you don't really think about like where you met that person. You think about how you interact. And so, I latch on to how empowering it is and how you're able to do community. And we just encourage the right type of community. And we do that with the stories we tell, the people we put in leadership roles, and that rubs off and people start having real experiences.
Do you find, though, that accountability or vulnerability is harder online or easier? What's been your experience with that? Because, okay, here's what I'm thinking. On Facebook, there's this whole perfectly, your life perfectly curated. So there's this whole braggy aspect about it. People's life on social media is not necessarily their reality. Does that kind of phenomenon carry over into an online group where, because you're not living with people, day after day. So Jay, if you and I were in an online group, we live, 100 miles apart from each other, you wouldn't know what I'm presenting to you because you don't see me on Sunday. You don't see how I am with my family. Doesn't that limit what accountability you could have? Because you could kind of fake your way through the group. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand it. And those same questions happen in physical groups. That people show up and don't talk, people don't show up for a couple weeks, and there's no follow up. I mean, as somebody who has over 1,000 small groups that meet in homes, and also 700 plus online groups, I see the same issues happening online and in homes.
Okay,
it's the same thing. We have this conversation internally, and as a church and me individually, I think about this a lot because I'm part of me and my family. We go to a campus here, and that's how we experience church. And so for me, I definitely know the value, and that would be the primary way I want people to interact with each other. And that's what I want for all. It gets a little problematic when not everybody can do that, and there's all sorts of reasons. So I would say you always have your primary target. It's almost like we talk about this idea is that, nobody strives to be the thief on the cross, that, to meet the bare essentials to go into eternity with God. Everybody strives to be a Paul or obviously even Jesus, but we know what the bare essentials are to give them a taste. And so that's where online groups fit this in between. And our hope is it's a catalyst to drive them to take an even deeper step. And so it's more about the potential out of it. And so I see people, I've seen that happen where people hide, but I also know the really good online hosts go deeper and they follow up and they chat. And so our primary groups, they're meeting online video and they're chatting, and then they have one-on-one conversations with each other. They have accountability partners.
Okay.
And then they'll even plan trips together. They'll do we've seen groups where they'll plan, hey, let's all go to a Saddleback campus together, and they'll plan their vacations and they'll go. And that starts a whole nother thing. We'll have groups that's
cool,
that will do mission projects in their community and come back and talk about it. We just went through this Miracle Mercy campaign, and I got to hear about groups online that were handing out bags to the homeless in each of their communities. So they did it, they talked about it, went off, executed, came back and talked about their experiences. And so it's, for me, I see the potential, and I know there's going to be a 5%. It's the same way the 5% happens in our local small groups, that there's going to be some individuals that, you're going to need to be a little bit more, like you're going to have to ask the deeper question, and you're going to, hey, let's not do this. Let's do this. It's the same thing. This idea of with our online church where people watch online, it's like, isn't it easier for somebody to float? Well, as somebody who goes to a large church, I know a lot of people that kind of step in the back and they watch and they go. Now, they are ignoring they're ignoring people that are like shaking their hands and the next step. But I know, it takes them a couple times, and on the third time, most likely they're going to be ready to engage. And so I just see it as an outreach. And we provide easy next steps, not only for them to go deeper, but also for their group to get healthier. And that's where training and so forth can help aid that.
So it's interesting. So the part that intrigues me is what you just said, that it's the levels of accountability or vulnerability, all of the growth stuff is not that different in an online group as is in regular. Because we all do know in small groups ministry that really a lot of it rises and falls on the leader and their intentionality. And I love what you said, that you don't just kind of end with the online group meeting, just like you wouldn't end with a home group meeting, but you have those one-on-ones, whether they're by text or chat or some other more tech method than a phone call. But there's the same sort of leadership stuff you would do as a regular small group leader. You just happen to meet on the screen. So I think that does help. And in some ways, I've read articles that talk about how people are actually more intimate sometimes and more vulnerable online because it feels safer. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but I could see if that's their first step, that might be a good venue for it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to, there's generational stuff. There's also like learning style aspects to it. And so that's why I would not say online groups are for everybody. And I have told people that when people try to get connected, I'm like, you know what, you're probably, first off, if you're having a hard time using your computer,
then it's not for you.
Yeah. And that's where we have to be very clear. We often do something, if you're at our church, you would never know this, but this is something that I think if you're leading at a church in any level, you're probably aware of this, that there's definitely, if they're in the midst of some kind of high care scenario, we definitely prefer to get them into something physical. So if they just lost a loved one, a child, a divorce, we make it, if they're a high level care, then I am very strategic of like, there's a high likelihood that maybe this isn't what you should be doing right now. Now, it might be, but I'm just very particular on the way you're wired, both in learning style, personalities, technology preferences. I just think there's a lot of individuals, and I am one of them, that I have found more and more of my relationships are primarily are strengthened from technology. So my small group I'm part of, we have a group text message that we talk and text constantly. We were texting this week. We weren't going to meet. We can't meet because we don't have a babysitter, and we're trying to figure out what to do. And so we have found that our group is strengthened by that, because we are all in that 20-something kind of demographic. And I have found it's a very natural way for us to connect with other people, and it's the way we learn. And that's why, if it's not your thing, don't force it. But I think that's where you got to, like, I would have a conversation with anybody. It's like, okay, who in your church this could be a great way to expose them and challenge them, and also be an outreach. And especially thinking about, because regardless of if you do online groups or not, it's kind of a bigger philosophical question of how do you integrate current technology into your strategy of reaching your community, also developing those who are attending your church. So this is just one of those ways that we have integrated that into our kind of concentric circle model.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. So when should a church consider starting online groups? What are some signs for us to look for to say, hey, it's time to jump on?
Yeah, I think for any church, once you've figured out how to do small groups well in your own context, once you've integrated small groups in a healthy way, you understand expectations of a host, you understand how to onboard and get a group healthy. Once your community understands that, I think online groups are like a phase 2, phase 3 for. So
you don't start that out as your first small group model.
I wouldn't, because it's just there's a lot of extra things you have to do. I think with anything, it's like, it's kind of like a minimal product launch. You just want to get it off the ground. You know what I mean? You don't want to overcomplicate your process. Integrate small groups. Do the same thing. You be part of a small group. Your church start figure out how to do it well. And then the second phase or third phase, figure out, okay, could we experiment with online groups? And what I mean by that is, do you have a portion of your community, once you have groups going on, do you have a portion of your community that are really, when you jump on Facebook, are very active, or maybe Twitter or Snapchat, and you see there's a portion of your congregation that are super active on social media, and maybe they lean a little bit younger, and that's a very broad way, because I think technology is so neutral now. It's less about age. And it depends if you're an avid learner or not. So my kids, my kids, I have a 5 and a 3-year-old, and they've had an iPad their entire lives, and they're going to be way more user friendly to this. And so for any church, I would say, if you see your church, you're doing small groups well, and then you're seeing a younger demographic that is really engaged with technology, what I would say, and you can see that on Facebook and usage and so forth, I would say ask the question, should we experiment with online groups? And I would start with Facebook groups and see if you can do some kind of Facebook group experiment to see the type of engagement and type of community can come out of that.
But a Facebook group can't be, you can't have a group meeting through Facebook, can you?
No, you can't. But what I would say is, Facebook groups, what I love about Facebook group is that the Facebook group becomes your patio experience. And start a Facebook group, and it's kind of like, here's our patio experience, and then once a week post a link to your live experience. Okay. And so the idea, add everybody to your Facebook group. So it's Joe Smo Church Facebook group on Wednesday nights. And the idea is every week, every week on Wednesday, I'll post a link to our Zoom.us link to meet, or Skype, or a Google Hangout. And the idea is the Facebook group becomes it's your constant activity room. It's your activity room. And then every week you post a link to your live event. And then what you can say in the live event is you go, hey, by the way, I'm going to post 3 questions this week on the Facebook group. Respond to that, and we'll meet next week and we'll talk about that. And so the idea is that becomes a kind of your patio experience, and then your worship experience is your live link that you post every week, and everybody meets there.
And let's talk about what platform is best for that live link, and how many people would you recommend for an online group?
I would honestly, I would do the same thing that you would do with any of your local. Okay. So whatever you set your expectations, a lot of people do this a lot of different ways. We model small groups, should be, any between 8 and 12.
Yes.
12 is,
that's a classic.
Yeah, 8 and 12. 12 is, 12, even that gets a little big. I have a small group with 10, and it's because we all have kids, so it gets a little crazy. So even that, it's we're right at the threshold. So for me, the same expectations that you have with your local groups, put those same and I would say responsibility, rules, everything. It's replicate your process. The only thing is your meeting space. Your meeting is not going to happen at home. It's going to happen on Facebook or however you choose, and then whatever technology you choose to do on top of that. And so we have, what we do at Saddleback is that we provide a base way to access video content, our small group studies, from anywhere. And so our platform is chat-based, text-based, and then it's you get online access to our video content. So anybody anywhere can watch week 1 of a study. And then what I do, I come alongside and I say, use whatever video software you want to meet in real time. And so I recommend Zoom.us. I recommend Google Hangouts. I recommend go to My PC, go to Meeting. I have just found, as somebody who's been doing this for 4 years, is that everybody, your meeting software is kind of like your language. Everybody has their preference. Like,
what's your favorite? Your favorite Zoom?
I love Zoom,
but Zoom costs money.
Zoom does cost money, but the first 45 minutes are free. So
you just have to hang out. So you're getting a deep conversation. Oh, oops, 45 minutes, we're done.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, is that, like, I like Zoom so much, I pay for it, but that's the thing, is that it's kind of, that's the preference. And so I really like Zoom. Skype introduced this a while back, is that what you can do is that on Skype or Zoom, and most platforms now do this, is that you can, the host can share their screen and play a video. And so the idea is that you could get together
and watch it together.
Really easy. So it's really seamless. You can with Zoom. They do provide churches for those who want to take next level. We don't do this. But you can buy rooms, like direct links. And so you can, like, your church essentially could spend like $10 a month and buy a link. And the idea is that you can lease that link to anybody.
That's
so
incredible.
you can like book the link, and they treat it just like a meeting room. So it's just like, this is an imaginary room that anybody. So I know churches that have done online groups that they'll buy like 3 links or 4 links, and the idea is that they have these 4 online rooms, and they schedule groups.
And that's through Zoom?
And that's through Zoom. I know, I talked to the guys at XXX Church. They've done stuff like that, where they have,
cool.
They do support groups for those struggling with porn. And they did that, where they just bought it and they rebranded it. And so the idea is that, like, hey, you're going to use this room between Wednesday from this time to this time. And so that way you can then share that. And so those are some strategic things, but I would just use Google Hangouts or Skype. Those are basic ways for people. And plus, there's so many free tutorials on how to let your host know how to do it. You can just like Google it and say, hey, here's the thing. Here's how to use Skype. And but the share your screen is key. If they have a share your screen, then you can all watch the video together and then talk about it.
So the Google Hangout is one of the downsides of that, is that it's limited to 10, right? Or is that changed? Okay, so
I'm not sure of the most up to date. I don't really personally. I don't love Google Hangouts. I think it's a little wonky, and it's it's kind of like the same way I feel about Google Plus is the same way I feel about Google Hangouts.
So the small group network communications team uses Google Hangout, by the way, but we don't have up to 10. I just want to tell you, your people like it.
You're gonna get me in trouble now.
I'm gonna get you in trouble. Now they all heard this, and we actually have used it, and it's been fine. But I know the limitation is a thing. But what's nice about Google is that it's a familiar name, and I think especially for the older generation people like me, it's an easier on ramp than something else. Okay, I have to ask you about this thing called Uvu, because someone on our Facebook group asked about it, and they said they liked that. I don't know what that is.
Say it again. Uvu. I don't see. This is the thing. Like, you can't even keep up with. I
thought you were an expert, Jay. I'm so disappointed.
I am. No. I'm excited to see, like, as the live stuff gets more integrated in Facebook and so forth. Like, I know people that were experimenting using like Facebook Live as a way to like to connect with people, or like or Periscope, and the way that like one person could talk and then it could spur on conversation in the group. And so there's so many cool ways to harness this. But I think for any church, so for your church, if you wanted to just dip your feet in the water, you can have Facebook groups, and then you can use Google Hangouts or Skype, and then you just provide video content for them to access. You don't even need video content, really. What you could do is that you could set up a weekly email, and you send them 3 questions based off the weekend message, and they could just talk about it.
Or if they have their own books, study guide books, that they could do offline and then talk about it online.
Exactly.
And I really like that. That really simplifies it. I think what's overwhelming, if you've never done online groups, the overwhelming piece is the technology, and it's like now it's, as you said, every day it's becoming more familiar to us, and that helps. We're starting to run out of time, and I really want to ask you the last couple of questions. questions. What about the ministry side? Okay, so say we have the tech figured out and we go with, one of the main platforms. On the ministry side, do you find yourself looking for a different kind of leader or host than you would for a physical group, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely benefit if they're more of a digital native, like they're more comfortable with technology. I think it's harder to onboard somebody who maybe is not bad with technology but struggles with it, because I think there's some things that you have to just be comfortable with. And so I tend to look for that individual a little bit more. But I think we have just seen at Saddleback with our groups, you get a group of people that know each other, regardless of what platform you pick or how they meet. If you just give them the ability to go through some material, they'll figure out how to meet. And that's, it's almost like get out of the way. And so it's like, yeah, I have some preferences, and some of those preferences you can get beyond. I tend to really gravitate towards those preferences if I want them to be on my leadership team more. And so that's where I say, you got to be a little bit more comfortable, because at the end of the day, the only reason why we have 1,800 small groups is because I got some amazing volunteers that have scaled this and care about it and have vision, and those individuals tend to have to meet some of those criteria. But I'm not really looking for any of those things if you just want to take a step and host. And so it's just, and that more speaks to our church and greater how amazing we do groups. So
yeah, and it doesn't matter. I mean, it's gonna be the same issues of people that have that kind of heart and skill. As far as asking people into the groups, do they self-populate, or are you sending them people?
Yeah, so I would say probably 80% of our groups self-populate, and then 20% are us plugging people into their groups. The problem with plugging people into groups, and I would just say a barrier, is that it takes 2 or 3 times to try out a group before it really is a right fit, and that same thing is true online.
Okay.
And so for us, I have found, I think anybody who's done small group ministry at any level has just plugging people into groups. Sometimes it's just there's risk in that, and you want to make sure that's a good experience. And so some of those same barriers that happen locally happens online. It is a little easier because they can usually join the group pretty quickly. And so we have a group finder. And, we have rules that, you're not listed in the group finder until we're verified you and you're a member of our church. And so,
same thing for online groups.
Yeah, same things for our online groups. And so I have a whole team that is responsible for plugging into groups. And, I do think that we have the luxury because, and this is interesting, I've noticed that this just in the last couple of years, this distinguishing myself is that with the online community, because my first touch is with them digitally, they're more likely to respond to me quicker.
Oh, that's nice.
You know what I mean? So the idea is that they've emailed me or called me, and they're more likely looking for my email. Where if I meet somebody on the patio and I plug them in, when I email them, that might be a new connection that they're not familiar with. And so I feel like it's a little easier for me to get responses digitally, because that's where they first met me, and that's their communication point moving on. And so yeah,
that's a big plus if they respond. And I guess let's land on this one. I love what you've said earlier about moving people online in their baby steps to offline, and you guys are very intentional about doing that. What's the key to that piece?
Yeah, and so we want to move people online to offline by hosting a group in their home. I know that if I can get somebody in a home with other people, and I'm talking to the choir here with this
of course
network here, that if I can get other people around them, that's healthy. And so the way we use our online services is that we have a service. We have a window of our door. Our church front door is open 24/7 online, and anytime you can experience our service. And the idea is that is a continual way that we are inviting them to take a next step. And so in our process, if they take a next step, we provide them a way to get into community. And one of those steps in between is we say, hey, you can either start a group online or join a group online, or you can start a group in your home or join a group in your area if there's an option. And so for us, the key is we think strategically like any church does. We just think strategically about the things we ask online. And so I would say when you're doing services online, when you're putting your video content on YouTube and Vimeo and on Facebook, however you're doing it, think about doing an intro on the front end or a close and say, hey, by the way, thanks for watching that. By the way, do you want to get connected to our group? And so we've done that, and we've just crazy stuff has happened where when you ask them, even, let's say if we got 20,000 people, we ask and we get 1,000 responses, that's huge. And so we've just done that the last 4 and 5 plus years of doing our online community. And again, there's been so many people, volunteers and leaderships and a lot of vision at Saddleback that has got us to this place. But we just started to make that ask on our digital items, and we started to see responses, and that developed into our online community.
And I think that's really the key. I mean, to the debate I said that I was engaged in many years ago, the key really is that the online community is not an end in and of itself.
Yes.
It's really, the way you're describing it, it's really another pathway that helps people get in and get connected and get in community. But it's so that you continue to move along that path of spiritual development. And that makes a lot of sense for that. So thank you so much, Jay. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I would say this is just like a freebie for those who are listening. Searchable.church. Searchable.church. There's an organization that just started to help churches get Google grants free. So searchable.church will get your church, if you're an official nonprofit, you can get $10,000 a month of free ad money to promote your church on Google. And so it used to take, you had to go through this verification. It's a little messy. I've done it at Saddleback. I've done it through another nonprofit that I'm a part of. It's free money to advertise on the sidebar on Google search. And searchable.church now, this ministry now helps churches get on there free and will manage it for you for free. So searchable.church, if you're thinking about online community, I don't even care. Just do it. So
that's worth listening for the whole 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Just for that last nugget. I'm definitely on it. I wrote it down. I'm going to go tell our communications person as soon as we're done. Yeah. Well, Jay, thank you so much. Jay is a digital citizen. So he's on Twitter at Jay Kranda. He's got jkranda.com as well as Social Media Church. And he's got free articles and podcasts and stuff on there. And also Jay's part of our small group network Facebook page. And so feel free to ask questions there, interact with each other, and no question is dumb. So feel free to ask him tech questions, strategy questions, whatever you'd like, and see how he can be helpful to you. So thanks so much for helping us understand the digital world a little better and not be as frightened by it, because this is where we live. And so kind of to chime in, I'm excited to try some of these ideas. So thank you for listening to Group Talk. God bless you, Jay, and see you next time.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to Here to There, part of the Group Talk network of podcasts. If you like what you've heard, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out smallgroupnetwork.com for more resources.